Hello, everyone, and I hope you are all doing great today. We're really excited to have you for today's Housing and Home Ownership Network learning opportunity. Today's webinar is entitled Sustaining Home Ownership, Tools and Strategies for Lasting Success. We have a wonderful person here from our steering committee from this webinar, from this network, and we'll be introducing her very shortly. But for now, we're going to just cover a few housekeeping tips, and then we'll move straight into today's conversation. So my name is Olivia Harp, and I'm the program manager for network building here at Prosperity Now. And I'm here to get you not only settled, but I'll also be moving us through today's conversation as we continue through this fireside chat. So just a few housekeeping tips. If you've been here before, you're very familiar with all of these. We want you to know that all of our webinars will be available via YouTube in the coming weeks, and we've switched to Zoom. So if you have any technical issues, you can click this link here to get any help while you're on the platform. And also, all webinar attendees are muting to ensure sound quality, but we want you to use that questions box to share your thoughts at any time. And we want to hear thoughts, questions, anecdotes, stories, best practices, anything that you have to offer or that you want to use to engage your fellow friends of the field here today. And then also, if you experience any technical issues, you can contact us directly at zoomwebinar@prosperitynow.org. And so, again, we're happy to have you here today. We want you to get cozy and join from a quiet place. Grab a snack or coffee and settle in. And again, continue to engage us using the questions box. We want to hear from all of you on today's call and reflect on ways to apply this to your work as you continue to learn throughout the conversation. So many of you know that we have a revamped mission here at Prosperity Now. And so Prosperity Now's mission is to inspire bold action and provide organizations with the tools, resources, and research needed to help people build prosperity so everyone can thrive. And that's exactly what we're here to do on today's call. And so without further ado, today's speaker is Karyn Hausknecht-Yetman. She is a housing programs manager from Belmont Housing Resources, and she is also one of our wonderful steering committee members for this network. So Karyn, we're really excited to have you here today. And we want you to share a little bit more about yourself as we move into today's icebreaker. So Karyn, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your approach to this work, your role, and just things that you've learned, anything, just a quick snapshot of your bio. And then we ask everyone else to use the chat or the questions box to answer today's icebreaker. So why is it important for organizations to take long-term approaches to home ownership support to create lasting change for generations to come? But Karyn, I will kick this question to you and also allow you to introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for Olivia, and thank you for having me on the call today. It's always great to talk with fellow community members about, what's happening with home ownership across the U.S. So definitely happy to hear any stories anyone else has as well. So again, my name's Karyn. I'm Housing Programs Manager and HUD Certified Housing Counselor for Belmont Housing Resources for Western New York. So Belmont is a full service housing agency. We serve the western part of New York State. And so I always kind of say that Belmont's almost like three nonprofits under one roof. And we get to share, accounting and IT and HR and all of that. So at Belmont, we got started because we offer the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which a lot of people know as Section 8. And that's how we got started back in 1977. So we've been in the community for a long time. But our first president kind of looked at that and said, okay, this is great. Housing choice vouchers help a lot of people, but what else can we do? So that's when we expanded into, doing property development. And we were building apartment complexes. We kind of said, well, we're building these complexes. Maybe we should be managing those complexes as well.
Mhm.
And so we got to property management, and then we moved into, developing single family homes and selling homes. And we thought, well, if we're going to be selling homes, maybe we should educate the community. And so at Belmont, we've been a HUD certified housing counseling agency for the past 25 years. We're celebrating our 25th year this year. It's our newest department, but 25 years we've been around for a long time, and I've been here for 23 of those 25 years. Um, And so with our HUD certified housing counseling services, we offer the full comprehensive services. So we do rental counseling, financial management, first time home buyers, post purchase counseling, foreclosure prevention, reverse mortgage counseling. We do everything. And so when I first started, we had a team of two. So it was my supervisor, Sandy, and myself. And over time, we've been able to grow from two housing counselors up to 20. So we're offering a variety of programs for the community that I'm going to talk about today. Um, and for the icebreaker question, like I said, I've been doing this for almost 25 years now. I actually got my start with Prosperity Now. I'm not sure if you knew that. As an AmeriCorps Vista way back when. I've seen over time how home buying really can create generational wealth. And the first story I want to tell today is one that happened just about 2 years ago. I was at a home buyer fair and I had this young woman come running up to me. She said, "Oh my gosh, you still work at Belmont?" I was like, "Oh yeah, it's a great company. Love working here." And she said to me, "Do you remember me?" And I'm trying to think in my head, I'm like, is this one of my cousins? Is this someone that I don't know? And she said, "You helped my mom buy her home way back I helped her mom buy her home back in 2008." And then it started flowing back to me who she was. So her mom was receiving the Section 8 voucher, the housing choice voucher. She had been escaping a bad situation. She moved to Western New York and she knew no one. She had no, family contacts. She had no
Mm,
support system, and she had a young daughter. So we had home buyer classes and home buyer clubs. And so she was coming to all of our different classes, and but she had no one to watch her daughter. So her daughter came to the classes with her. And I still remember her daughter because she was very attentive. She was participating. I told her mom like, oh, she just wants to bring book, bring a homework, do something like that.
mhm.
Just so she doesn't disturb the class. No, she was a full participant. So now we're gonna go back to 2 years ago. And so she comes up to me, she said, "You helped my mom buy her home. I always knew I'd be a homeowner." But since then, her mom graduated from Section 8 because her income kept growing, so she didn't need the assistance anymore, which is why I kind of fell off track with her. Her mom, was still in that house, loved it. And now her daughter graduated not just from college, but she got her master's degree in engineering, was doing really well for herself. Actually didn't qualify for any first-time homebuyer programs that we had because her income was so high, and she closed on her home. And so when I think about this, I think about this mom who came to Buffalo with nothing, ended up buying a home and was able to give this great life for her daughter. And, that's why, I do this. That's why I love, working in home ownership and everything that we do, because we're truly creating something that's going to be passed on from generation to generation.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And that I think that story not only level sets us, but it captures the essence of not only why we're here today, but why we do this work. We want to make sure that we create not just long-term, but like lasting impact for families and communities. It's not enough, and I'm preaching to the choir, right? It's not enough to get people in their homes. We want them to stay in their homes and be comfortable in their homes and ensure that all of the conditions and aspects around them support that home ownership as well. So thank you so much for sharing that story. We hope that you all continue to share stories like that in the chat. We want to hear from you all throughout today's conversation. But I'm just going to pivot us very slightly into our fireside chat discussion because we want to hear more from you. Karyn, you've been in this work for such a long time. And we definitely love having people like you that have stayed committed for such a long time to this work, so that we can hear not only a bit about like your day to day and how you support communities and families, but just your approach and perspective as you come into the office to help out. And so we want to just start off with asking, what strategies have you found effective for organizing or promoting financial education in communities, and particularly for those first-time home buyers or families that are managing their budgets a little tighter?
Sure. The first thing I'm going to say, and this is going to be a common theme probably through every single question, is
Mhm.
that you have to have strong partnerships.
Yes.
So we can't do it alone. And I also think about, when we're targeting who we're working with, We offer all of our home buyer classes, financial education, credit counseling, financial management, coaching. Everything is
Mhm.
offered at no cost to the community thanks to different funding that we receive. Um, but when something is free like that, and I used to say like, well, it's open to anybody. When you're kind of saying like it's open to everybody and you're targeting everyone, you're really targeting no one. So we kind of took, about 15 years ago, I thought about that. We started taking a step back and we thought about how can we start meeting with people earlier. So I mentioned
Mhm.
that we also do rental counseling, and we do financial coaching. And so these are not related to home buying at all. But we know that if someone is in a place of housing instability or financial insecurity, that, buying a home is not going to happen in 3 to 6 months. It's going to take a long time, and there's a plan that needs to be made to help someone get there. So we started doing a lot of different partnerships with our local public schools, working with Department of Social Services. We even have, financial coaches within prenatal clinics working with pregnant moms to make sure they have, stable housing for their family. So we looked at a lot of different ways that we can reach out to the community before, home buying is even a goal to kind of remind them like, hey, we're here, we offer these services.
Mhm.
Like, yes, you're working your rental now, you're working on maybe your credit, getting your income up, whatever that might be. Because, 5 to 7 years from now, maybe then they're ready. And then they're like, oh, I remember Belmont. I remember going there and they really
Yeah.
helped me make a plan for my credit. Now, hopefully, they can help me make a plan for my home buying.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking, you talked a lot about reaching out, right? Or even in terms of funding, like the families and communities that you serve may not be paying, but someone is, someone is financially supporting that. And so, are there specific funding sources or community partnerships that have been especially helpful in supporting this work?
Oh, definitely. We work a lot with our different local financial institutions and, banks, credit unions, and they
Mhm.
help fund our services. We don't steer any which way, we have a list that any local place, people can go to. Um, but, that's really been a great partnership. Another partnership that's been great for us has been our local United Way. Our local United Way helps, with program development, funding our programs, referral sources and things like that. I still remember, when I was talking about we go into these prenatal clinics. It was about 10 years ago that we started, doing some program planning around this. And we weren't at the table at the very beginning because there's a potential for funding through the Department of Transportation to help moms get to their prenatal appointments. And so, they're doing a human-centered design, going and interviewing the pregnant women within the clinics. And they kept talking about, I wish I had somebody who could help me with my rental housing. I wish I had someone who could help me with my credit. It kept coming up
Mhm.
over and over again. And because the United Way knew what we did, they came to us and they said, hey, we're doing this kind of planning, human-centered design. No funding yet, but there's a potential for funding through the Department of Transportation. Would you be
Mhm.
interested? And I went in and I talked to our vice president at the time and I said, well, guess what? I have a potential for funding through the Department of Transportation. Can I do this? She kind of looked at me and said, well, how is this related to housing, our mission, what's going on? I said, well, give me a few minutes and I'll explain how,
Mhm.
housing is such a forefront of everyone's lives. Like that's, where they lay their head every single night
Yeah.
that, there's always a sort of a way that we can work together. And, we're not doing anything with, their pregnancy. We're not the ones being the doctors or anything like that, but we're
Mhm.
in that clinic and we're helping. So when they have housing insecurity or financial insecurity, there's ways that we can help and assist them with what's going on in their lives right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of brings me back to a quote that you said earlier. Like, if you're targeting everyone, then you're not targeting anyone, right? And so, understanding all of not only all of the departments, but all of the potential partners and spaces that feed into housing. As we think about people that are looking to purchase homes, they consider a lot of things. It's not just the home itself. So you have to appeal to parents, right? Transportation, commuting is a huge part of housing. So naturally, you're going to have people in those spaces that are aligned with priorities that you're trying to address as you're trying to help the community sustain home ownership. And so I'm going to, this isn't even a segue because everything, as you said, everything is connected whenever we're speaking about housing. And so I want to talk a little bit about those relationships that you've built with funders and local partners, and more so like the approach for building and maintaining those partnerships because they're available, right? And they're there, but there's a certain way that you have to think about how you're going to connect with those spaces or even incorporate them into your approach.
Right. And I mean, communication, that is huge.
Mhm.
And, it's always keeping in touch, keeping in contact, setting up like regular check-ins, even with your partners. We do this with the community members that we're, helping with their home buying or their rental, but we also want to do that with our partners as well. You
Mhm.
know, and it is work, there's a lot that goes along with that. It's not easy to keep these partnerships going. I'm thinking about one person we were helping just a couple months ago. She was getting her rental assistance through a different housing agency here in Buffalo. And, we had done everything to help this home buyer get things together so she could purchase her home. She was a person who was disabled. She was a mom. So she needed to have some modifications done to the home. So we're able to get a grant through our state housing finance agency to build a ramp for her home. Homes are very expensive in our area now, so we need to get money for, down payment and closing costs. So we kind of paired all these different things together. So
Mhm.
the mom, she was buying her home for around 170,000, and we're able to get $70,000 of that covered through different grants. And then she went back to her, housing choice voucher provider, and they said, "Oh, we can't do this because your mortgage payment is too high."
Mhm.
And if I didn't have that partnership, I might say, "Oh, the mortgage payment's too high. There's nothing we can do. I guess you're going to lose out on all this money. You're going to lose this house. You're not going to be able to close on this home."
Mhm.
But because I had that partnership, I reached out and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And not to get too technical, but they have what they call the front end ratio for mortgages. They require that it could be no more than 40% of her income. The front end ratio was 40.37%. So she was going to lose this home over half of a percent. So we
Yeah.
end up, negotiating, talking to the seller. The seller, brought down the home price a little bit. It got down to so it was 39.99% of her income. And now she was able to buy that home and get the money for the modifications and everything that she needed.
Yeah.
So but, if we were just working in our silos, like, I'm doing the housing counseling, we have the lender doing the mortgage, we have the Section 8 provider just doing the Section 8, she
Mhm.
may never close on her home, but communicating, working together, that's how we were able to make the home buying a reality for this home buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like housing sustainability, it really relies on community-driven strategies. And in order to do that, like messaging and outreach is always at the center of everything. Just being transparent, making sure everyone's on the same page and making sure everyone's aligned with the goal, which is ultimately home ownership. And so as we're talking, first of all, you say you don't want to get too technical. Feel free to get as technical as you
Okay.
need. This is prosperity now, after all, right? We want to get into
Right.
the weeds of everything. But right now, we've talked a lot about community, but I think with this work, especially as we're talking about keeping homeowners in their homes, that we have to kind of look up and take a bird's eye approach to everything that's affecting what we're trying to achieve here. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about just general housing trends or considerations that future homeowners should be aware of, especially as we are all navigating the evolving landscape of home ownership and constant shifts and changes.
Sure. And working on a statewide at an advocacy level, we work with a great coalition called the New Yorkers for Responsible Lending. And I kind of want to give them a shout out because they do a lot of good work. And a really hot topic that we're working on with them right now is what they call a tangled title.
Mhm.
This refers to when, the legal ownership of property is unclear and it's being disputed, usually because of an estate. Maybe, someone was living with their mom, their mom, passes away. but the title was never transferred, and now they're in the home, but someone else is claiming that they also have ownership rights to that property. And so it's something that, we haven't gotten into too much other than through the foreclosure work that we do. But there's a lot more that needs to be happening, I think, with communities and estate planning.
Yeah.
There are, housing, HUD certified housing counseling agencies that are, starting estate planning, programs and things like that. It's something that, we're thinking about, but we're kind of just testing the water a little bit through our foreclosure work. And partnering with our local legal services, so legal services are doing a lot with that. And we are lucky to have this whole statewide network through what's called the Homeowners Protection Program, or what's we call it HOP. um, that was created through the National Mortgage Settlement. That there's a statewide coalition of of housing counselors and paralegals and attorneys that are all working to help homeowners stay in their homes.
Yeah, I'm muted. Oh, no, I'm not muted.
You're
Absolutely.
good.
And in the interest of time, like you said, everything's connected. I feel like we have talked about, like you've answered questions that I had planned for you. And so we're going to skip around a little bit and kind of stay in this bird's eye, kind of systems, approach, a way of thinking. And so, we want to ask this question specifically for people on this call that are trying to optimize their efforts as it relates to home ownership and more specifically sustainability. So, what actions can professionals, including lenders, realtors, appraisers, nonprofits, all of us just trying to make a change in this space, right? What actions can we take to broaden access to home ownership in communities that have traditionally seen lower home ownership rates?
Oh yeah, for sure. One
There's a
great
lot we
partner.
can do, I
Yeah, I know.
know.
There's so much. I'm like, how much time do I have? um, so we've been doing a lot, with working with the trusted leaders who are already in the community that, where there is kind of that historically lower home ownership rate. So our local NARAB, which now I gotta remember, it's the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, I believe, that they do this whole thing where they're trying to do the Building Black Wealth tour. They're in 100 cities every year in April trying to spread, information about home buying.
Mhm,
We always make sure that we're partnering with them because they're directly there in the community. Other places that we go to partner is looking at private developers, which, may sound, like, how's that working, but our state, so New York State, does give funding to private developers to rehab homes and sell them to first-time home buyers. So
mhm,
we want to make sure when the private developers are doing that, that we're in the room with them, talking about concerns, talking about pricing, and talking about the housing counseling services that we can
yeah,
provide to help them locate buyers for their programs. Um, and then any other local block clubs, faith-based, any organizations that are in the community, instead of just coming to that community saying like, hey, we're doing this, we're going to work with those leaders and talk to those leaders and say, what does your community need? We might come in with ideas of like, we want to do like this kind of program. But if that's not what the community needs, then it's not going to be successful. So we
yeah.
want to make sure those leaders in the community that they're informing us and they're talking to us about how we can help to either to build home ownership or to stay in home ownership for those who are there already.
Mhm. Absolutely. And we're going to stay in the community space for our final question before we move into audience Q&A. But as we're talking about community and community-driven solutions, right? Because that's who we serve. Those are the people that we're working to not only house adequately, but for generations to come, right? So how do you ensure that your work is shaped by community priorities? And what does that look like when you're either designing or just improving or adapting programs that you already offer?
Sure. So we do this in two different ways. So one way is that we do a lot of what we call, human-centered design, which I know a lot of people have heard of, where you build your programs by asking the community, what do you want to see for these? And it's not just, focus groups, but it's actually interviewing and sitting and
Mhm,
talking and finding out like what do they need. And at our organization, we have something that we call our Tenant Voice Committee, which they've renamed themselves the Help Squad,
mhm,
because they're helping us with inform our programs. And so it's almost like a board of directors, but they're all people in the community who we would serve. And so when we have an idea for a program or for funding, we kind of bring it to them. We say, hey, like we have like this idea of something we want to do. What is that going to look like? And so sometimes they take us in directions that we never thought we would go, or bring up things that we never even would have thought to do. So, I mean, it's really great to have this dedicated group that kind of helps us make those decisions. Um, and then, we also make sure that we participate in, our county's consolidated plan process.
Yeah.
So every 5 years, they have to have the whole consolidated plan where they're deciding, the money they're getting, how are they going to use that? And so we want to
Mhm.
make sure our voice is heard and that we're in that consolidated plan to, inform like what's going to happen in the future. If there's housing rehab, how are we going to be part of that moving forward? If there's going to be first time home buyer programs, what is that going to look like?
Mm.
And then finally, you want to check with your state department. In New York State, is called the Department of Financial Services, to find out who is the ones who are reviewing the banks for their for their Community Reinvestment Act credits, CRA credits. So we're part of that conversation. We're talking about our banks, our credit unions. What are they doing? What's missing? What would we like to see? So we also, are talking with our state, to kind of say like, hey, this really big bank came in, they did all this to buy out this littler bank. Now, what are they doing to help the community? What's the benefit for us?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And even as you speak about your organization's approach, it seems like you have to be present, right? You have to be in those spaces. It's not enough
Yes.
to research them from the outside. You have to be present. You have to be connected, right? Connected to everyone in the room, looking for opportunities to collaborate and create lasting impacts, and also mindful. You have to be really mindful and tuned in to what the community wants and what is needed as well. And so we're going to hop into a few Q&A questions before closing out today's webinar. So we love to be technical. We have a question from Paula. She's asking in terms of how you facilitate your partnerships. What do those agreements look like? Is there an MOU in place? And how do you kind of meet in the middle to ensure that both parties' priorities are aligned or and met?
Yeah. Definitely MOUs, even if there's not any, funding going back and forth and no financial, but there's still going to be information about, information sharing, So if we're going to be sharing information, we want to make sure that we're both on the same page and that we're, creating these MOUs to share between each other. And that before, and I was talking about, the other housing choice voucher agency in our area. We have an MOU, and then we also, I have the client or the community member sign something saying I'm able to talk to them. So I want to
Mhm.
make sure that the community member knows that, yes, I'm helping you with your home buying. And yes, I will be talking with, this community partner and just making sure that they know that these interactions are happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just have a few people just for shout outs. We have Anthony Mitchell in the chat. He's a fellow steering committee here today. So we're really happy to have you here today. And Karyn, I feel like we never have enough time because I had more questions and
No.
I wanted to dive in a little bit more. But again, thank you so much for being with us today. Definitely a wealth of knowledge, expertise, but also just passion for the community and wanting to see the best for the families that you serve. So I really appreciate you taking this time to come today and just share a little bit more, not only about yourself, but your successes. I would not be surprised with all of the amazing things that you shared today if you had some people reaching out to you or connecting on LinkedIn. But that's
Yeah.
what these moments are all about, right? Just again, reaching out, building those partnerships, and ensuring that we can create impact for families that we serve.
I'm
Um,
always happy to talk more. So like if anyone wants to reach out and have conversations, please feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Okay, so you heard it here first.
Yes.
As you probably already guessed from today's conversation, Karyn is here to help. Again, we're really happy that you were here today for today's webinar. We want everyone to stay up to date for not only this webinar when we post this recording, but stay up to date on our website on upcoming opportunities that we have. We want you to complete today's survey and let us know what you want more of or even less of. We want to ensure that we're meeting your needs as we continue to do learning opportunities here at Prosperity Now. We want you to sign up for our networks, especially our housing and home ownership network. network. That's what this content is geared towards today. And yeah, and just let us know your suggestions for future calls. Continue to keep in touch, and we'll do the same. And again, thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to seeing you for our next learning opportunity. Have a great one.